the pro scene is thriving in Valorant right now. With big tournaments like the FaZe Invitational and all-star teams like Sentinels and C9, I thought it would only be right to give you the top 10 tips to carry like pro players. That's right, in this video, I'm going to be giving you 10 tips pulled directly from how pros are playing their matches, and then I'm going to explain why it's good in what situation so that you can start adopting it in your games and start to carry just like the pros do in their professional matches. Now, smash that subscribe button if you want to win your next 5 games straight. Yeah, you heard it right here. You smash that subscribe button and you're going to win the next 5 games straight, but if you don't, then honestly, you might lose every single one of them. So don't take the risk, smash that subscribe button. But without further ado, let's just jump right into it, shall we? So the first tip that I'm gonna break down that pro players, some of them are using, specifically Sinatra on Sentinels, which is one of the best NA teams right now, his Wallbang recon on Ascent defense. You see, every time he plays Ascent, he almost always solos defense on B site and plays Sova with an LMG. Yes, it doesn't matter how much money he has, he's either going to be rocking the Ares or the Odin, and he's going to be shooting through the walls. Now, how you do this is you just do one bounce from on top of the little window, it bounces right down, and he will instantly wallbang anyone he tags. Now, even if he doesn't tag anybody, he still will wallbang just in case they try to basically debate it or dodge it, and he will get a lot of damage in and sometimes even get kills. Now, he will consistently do this. This is not something that he just stops and rotates off. And the reasoning behind this is he basically can hold B by himself with this strategy, and in your ranked games, it's going to be even more powerful. I cannot tell you how easy it's going to be for you to catch 1, 2, maybe even 3 people by a simple wall bang with an LMG. So try it in your matches. If it works at the pro level with Sinatra, it will definitely work in your ranked matches to get a couple of kills and win you a game even. Now, the next pro tip that we're going to give you is actually hard stacking on eco with almost all shorties. Now, let me explain what this strategy is. Now, there's several layers to this. First off, when you are on eco, like you lost, let's say you lost pistol round, for example. Now, the second round, you could force, but if you lose, you get snowballed. And if you save, you're very unlikely to just win because enemies have better weapons. And in pro matches in particular, enemies are not going to play in your effective range. So more than likely, they will be playing disciplined, and it's going to be very hard to win against them when they have better weapons, just like it is in your ranked games. And what this strategy is at its core is actually just a guess, where you're 5 stacking one site, but here's the important part, most of you are hidden. So you will have like one person and he'll have the classic pistol and he can play that middle of the pack. He can be seen retreating, you can watch him, the enemy can see him and identify that he's there. Yeah, that's fine. But like a good 3 players on your side are rocking shorties and hiding close angles. Now, if enemies see an opportunity to push onto the site, and they do, they push on only to walk right into your shorties, you trade out for the kill, and you upgrade your weapons right away. This is basically an all or nothing strat because it only works if enemies go to your site, and you might be asking, what do I do if enemies don't go to my site? Well, the honest truth is, and the thing that pro players are doing, is they're not even going in to try to recontest. The enemy have better weapons, they're already at a huge disadvantage, and they try to circumvent that by making a Hail Mary play by guessing one or the other site. But if it doesn't work, they can simply go and hide near each other away from any points across the map. They make sure that no one pushes them, and if they do, they're going to punish them for it, but they're not going to give the enemy ult points, they're not going to give the enemy any money, and that's pretty much what they do. So it's a hard stack with shorty, plus a never retake if you manage to guess incorrectly. Now, moving on to the third pro tip that you're seeing a lot of players like Wardell do, and it's what I would call hero opping. Now, there are several different forms of hero opping. The truest form of hero opping is when you're buying an op, when you have no shields, you can barely afford an op, and none of your allies can buy any weapons. This is like the truest hero opping, but what you most likely see in ranked play is just someone, basically their team is on a pretty eco heavy round and the one person is going all the way to the op. And why they do this is because the op gives you the power. If you have the skill set, doesn't matter your health total, doesn't matter your utility, if you can hit your shots and you're confident, you can flip a inherent disadvantage with economy. And that's what hero opping is at its core. 4. You're basically making another Hail Mary play, just like with the stacking on shorties, but you're doing it with ops, and it's all in your hands. So like, let's say you're in your game, right? But you're quite a bit richer than some of your teammates, and instead of saving, you make a Hail Mary op play on defense. Now, this might seem pretty bad, but if you manage to get 1 or 2 kills with your op, all of a sudden, it doesn't matter that your team have worse guns than the enemy, you have numbers advantage, which we've talked about many times is the best form of advantage. Not guns, not abilities, not ultimates, it's numbers, and you can create that with an op so easily, and it's especially powerful when enemies don't expect you to have an op. They think, he would never buy an op, he barely has enough money to buy it, and all of his teammates are poor, so there's no way he buys an op. But that is exactly why it's so effective, because the second they don't respect it for a single millisecond, you're just gonna blow their head off just like that. I mean, realistically, you're gonna be aiming for the body, but you get the picture. This is the 3rd tip I have for you. Now, moving on to the 4th round, this is something that pro players are doing a lot, and this is a pretty simple one. It's just buying the Sheriff on Eco as a solo when you are a pop flasher. You're playing a character like Phoenix or Omen. The Sheriff is one of the best weapons that can convert just a single flash into a kill from medium to short range. Even enemies that have far better guns than you, like an AR, you get a successful flash off, or you just make the proper play with the right amount of mechanical skill behind it, you can turn and get that numbers advantage that we talked about. And that's why you're seeing a lot of the time, some players will eco fundamentally less than others. Players like Tens, players like Drone, players like even Sinatra, they will force themselves to buy these better weapons than their team, and sure, it might inadvertently hurt their economy a little bit more, but on average, they're gonna overcome that by getting more kills, and as such, they're gonna have a little bit more money to play around with. And if they just manage to pop off in some of these rounds, it gives them the possibility to win a round that they're fundamentally disadvantaged in the same way that hero opping did. So this is another tip that if you are confident in your sheriffing skills, try to whip it out on eco, especially if you're a pop or entry, you might be able to carry a round that you had no business winning. Now, moving on to the 5th tip that pro players are doing very often. This is a common strategy by TSM where they take control of an area like mid, and as they rotate off, they will actually leave a lurker behind. And what they do this for is they actually leave this lurker behind to specifically cut off rotation. So they will like push up mid on ascent on attack, for example. Then they will leave a lurker mid, and then they'll go rotate to A. And then when people come from B side to A side, that lurker is waiting there to cut them off. And they're rotating so fast that it really doesn't take any skill to cut these people off. The enemy doesn't have time to clear out every corner from B side to A side. So essentially you set up a play and then you flush them by making contact with the other point, and it really just is like a trap. Like you're like a spider laying a trap and you just kill them, and then that's as simple as that. And it's a really powerful strategy. Sometimes it's hard to do in solos, of course, but if you're playing ranked with a 5-man or you're playing scrims, try the strategy out. I think it's very powerful. Now moving on to number 6, this is a strategy that Sentinels incorporates a lot. Even C9 does it. It's giving up an objective and retaking as a 5-man instead. You see, a common strategy for a lot of players is I need to stall, I need to trade, I need to stand my ground, I can't give up sight. That's what they all think. Those are the 4 things that go through your mind. But in a lot of cases, this might not actually be the best. Sometimes when you stand your ground, you might just die, or you'll trade, but maybe your abilities were needed for the retake. Let me give you this example. Let's say you're Brimstone holding a site solo and the enemy pushes in, and you're the only smoke for the team. If you try to stand your ground and trade, doesn't matter who you traded for, now your team doesn't have smokes to re-enter site. So in that exact scenario, why it might seem like, hey, I traded one person for one person, it wasn't really worth it because now your team has no way to entry, and if the enemy team has really powerful sightlines and power angles, or they're holding an op or whatever, it's gonna be incredibly difficult for your team to make contact. So it's a lot better for you to just regroup as a 5 and then just use your smokes to re-engage the point. The next thing is some characters just don't have any means to stall. If you're playing a character that doesn't have the means to stall an entire team pushing in, then a lot of times it's just better for you to not give up your life because you're not gonna be able to stall them anyways. And in some maps, specifically like Ascent, as long as you regroup as a 5, retaking is a lot easier from the defender's side than it is from the attacker's side. And these maps are not as difficult to retake as some of the other maps in the game. So it really depends on a number of factors, but keep in mind, you don't always need to stand your ground, and sometimes it can inadvertently hurt your team. just like with the brimstone smoke example that I gave before. Now moving on to tip number 7, this is playing Sage like a lurker, and a lot of pro players are doing this right now, especially Sentinels in C9, but it really is just kind of being a cascade effect where they're just doing it down the board. Now you might be asking, what the heck? Sage as a lurker? Well, I kind of explained this concept a little bit before in my VOD review breakdown, but essentially what's happening here is the Sages, which on Sentinels is Sick and on C9 is Mitch, the Sages will essentially use all their abilities to stall, right? They'll use it in reactive ways, they'll stall the enemy, they'll use their slows, they'll use their barrier, but enemies are getting better and better at just breaking the wall, forcing out slows, and then all of a sudden you don't have any of your abilities anymore. Well, it's at that point that you become much more aggressive and you become much more proactive as Sage. But you have this inherent self-heal, which honestly is the best sustain that you could possibly have. Now, the exception to that is Reyna, who has a lot of sustain if she gets a kill, of course, but she's very underpowered in the current meta. She's very underpicked. She has no stalling capabilities, a poor ultimate, but Sage gets to basically do something similar to Reyna when she has that self-sustain, when she uses all of her abilities after she's stalled the enemy for a substantial amount of time, plus she has a more powerful ultimate in res. It's just the best of both worlds, and that's why you're seeing Sick and Mitch rack up the kills, because they're not playing Sage scared. They're not playing in the back of their team. They're really being proactive and kill hunting, especially after they don't have any more abilities later on in the game. Now moving on to the next tip to carry like pro players. Everyone knows about the time frame where you're just baiting out utility, right? You're playing in default, you're baiting out utility for a substantial amount of time, and this usually can work for quite a while, but you are susceptible to flanks, and that can be a way that the enemy just basically kill your entire team. You're gummed up in default, the enemy flank you, and you die. Well, a big problem with ranked play is way too many people are baiting out abilities. You realistically only need 2 or 3 to bait out tons of abilities in default. So what you do instead to prevent those flanks is you strategically move as a team and set up players in anti-flank positions, wherever that may be, to protect the openings or the flank routes for enemies, and your teammates just wait there until the 3 of you basically bait out as much utility as you possibly can. You can use your time as a resource here. Bait out all the slows, bait out some smokes, bait out some flashes, whatever it might be. You bait all that stuff out, and your other teammates are literally just waiting. They're just doing nothing. And if the enemy flank, you kill them. If they don't, that's all good, but it's flank prevention because you don't need a 5 stack, and it's a lot less effective to actually have a 5 stack and have one person just look at the flank, like stare right at the flank, because there's a lot of problems to that for a number of reasons. One, the space is not secured out in mid or out in default of B or whatever. So an enemy could have hypothetically pushed up not all the way to your flank, but is holding an angle for your rotation. So if you rotate as a team, you're gonna get killed. So basically that space is not secured at all. And 2, you're less likely to pick up a kill yourself on a flanking enemy because they know when they're gonna make contact with you. But if you're waiting in an anti-flank position, you're gonna be able to catch those flankers off guard and more than likely secure a couple of kills on them. And that's why it's just fundamentally more powerful. You create more space, you have less potential areas that you have to respect enemies to be in. It's going to be easier for you to rotate. It's going to be easier for you to bait out utility at the same time without worrying about someone sneaking up on you. It's just a win-win-win like down the line. Definitely try this in your games. Now moving on to tip number 9. This is a very Jett specific tip, but it hypothetically could actually apply to a lot of characters that have like some sort of damage based ability. So Tens will often eco, quote unquote, well, he'll actually buy just armor and his abilities, and then he will use his ultimate as a weapon. And at the very minimum, he tries to secure 1 kill so that he gets to upgrade his gun. Now, this is a high-risk play, but if you have the mechanical skill to back it up, you can pull it off. And this allows Tens to be far more aggressive with the buying on a lot of different rounds, like eco rounds. Specifically what I talked about before, where someone like a Jett would buy sheriffs every single round, or on the eco rounds, even when their team is saving. This is a perfect example of how you can get away with that. And there's other characters that can do this too, other characters that have powerful abilities or a way to guarantee the kill. Like, for example, if you're Raze, you could be rocking something that is less powerful, not necessarily an AR. Use your ultimate showstopper to try to confirm a kill and upgrade your weapon that way. but I think you get the picture. It's just another form of using your abilities to help you save money on eco. Now moving on to the last tip that I have for you that pros are doing incredibly often is this is how they're playing against flashes. So let's say that you have some sort of damage based ability, something like paint shells on rays. What pros are doing is they're whipping out their grenade, they're waiting, and they're not going to throw their grenade until the second they see a flash go out. And that is their trigger to actually throw their nade out. So basically, they are directly responding to an enemy's ability, and that is their counter or their go-ahead. They know that enemies aren't going to peek without using their ability if they have pop flashers, so they're using the engage of the pop flashers to throw their ability, and more than likely, the enemy will push in response to their ability only to get caught by your ability. But this works for tons of different abilities, honestly, but Raise Nade is the most obvious, but there's tons of other ones. But I do think that it's important to understand that in every single pro match, it's always an exchange of resources using one ability for another or responding to one ability with another. Now, do me a big favor, if you learned anything from this video, smash that fat, juicy subscribe button. But that's all we got for you today. Thanks for coming by. I'm Coach Mills, and of course, until next time.